Hello, Lander fans, and welcome to the first official episode of the Stasis Podcast. Coming to you live from the Medical Bay on Chimus 2, I'm your host, Sean Lemon of Intrepid Games. Now, as some of you may know, one of the key mechanics in Lander is variable player powers. So in this segment, we'll be exploring how crew abilities can influence your strategy and create interesting decision points for all players in the game. Each episode, we'll be introducing a new crew member from the Stasis deck, discussing their main features, showing some examples of how they interact with other game components, and explaining common ways they may influence your strategy. Let's get started. Today we are proud to be introducing you to a Greek native. He's the chief engineer of the colony. Let's give a warm Chimus 2 welcome to Stavros Zabat. As you can see, Stavros has an engineering class level of 5, which is the highest starting value a crew member can have in the game. His personality traits are fanatical and resourceful. When Stavros is your leader, your sectors and structures cannot be swapped, taken, or destroyed. This is a passive ability, which means you don't need to use an official order to specifically activate it. It's always in play. You can also see that Stavros is playable in all 3 game modes: Basic Simulation, Early Arrival, and Planned Arrival. Now let's show some examples of what makes him an interesting leader. In order to understand the value of Stavros' leadership ability, you first need to understand how sectors and structures can be swapped, taken, or destroyed. And in Lander, there's 3 main ways this can happen. The first is through the use of a leadership ability of another crew member in play. And as you can see here, there's actually 3 other crew members that affect the board. So they might allow the player to move one of your structures to another sector on the planet. They might allow them to destroy one of your structures, or they might allow you to move other sectors around. So by having Stavros, any of these effects would be totally negated, which is great. Now, the second way that sectors or structures can be affected in Lander is via action cards. As you can see here, there's actually a range of action cards. I've just taken a small subset from the deck. If you look on the second last page in the rulebook, there's actually a probability table, which shows there's 15 total cards within the deck that affect sectors. So we've got some that allow players to take each other's sectors, which usually requires being adjacent to the player's sector you're trying to take. There's also cards that allow you to expand and swap. I'll show you what that is right here. It basically means one player can claim a new sector adjacent to another player's territory like that. And then if they wanted, they can do a swap like this, where they would take that one and give them that one. Now, if you had a really good sector here, that could be a big loss for you. So by having Stavros as your leader, this would all be negated, which could be quite powerful. Now, it's worth mentioning that as you have more players in the game, there will naturally be more action cards in play and a higher likelihood that other corporations or other players will be adjacent to your sectors, which means there's a higher chance you'll be under attack. So by having Stavros, I would say his value increases as the player count increases and as there's more action cards in play. Now, the third way that sectors and structures can be affected is via these event cards. Now, I've just grabbed 2 here, so there's Earthquake and Industrial Sabotage. In both cases, they would involve you having to lose potentially a level 1 sector or your highest upgraded sector. So again, by having Stavros as your leader, you would opt out of this event effectively. It wouldn't affect you. So again, it could be very powerful. So what does Stavros mean for your strategy in Lander? Well, as we know, the objective of the game of Lander is to achieve the most mission stars, and there's different types of missions you can go after. Now, construction missions have no class or trait requirements, but they all link to how you develop the planet. So they require a certain number of claimed sectors, or a certain number of upgrades, or specific types of upgrades. By having Stavros as your leader, he protects the investment you make in the board. So if you are going for a construction mission, you don't have to be worried that another player is going to destroy one of your sectors or take a structure and send you back the other way. So he's useful from a mission perspective. He's also very useful in terms of accolades. So here we have a set of sector-based accolades. So these all relate to the board. If you're playing the early arrival or planned arrival variant, you'll only choose one of these. But it's worth 2 stars, and it's effectively free because you're not paying resources. So it can be oftentimes what swings a game one way or the other. And all 3 of these accolades relate to how many total claim sectors you have, how many upgrades you have, or how many structures you have on adjacent sectors.
either way, by having someone who protects all your structures and sectors on the planet means you can chase other players for these accolades without the fear that they're going to knock you back. So it's just another way that Stavros influences your strategy. I would say if he was my leader, I would not be afraid of placing adjacent or claiming adjacent sectors to other players, and I'd probably be more aggressive in my moves towards some of these accolades. The best way to think of Stavros is kind of like a human force field. The difference between Stavros and an item like this is that when the item's attached to your leader and someone tries to take a sector or structure, you can discard it to stop that action, but it's pretty much a one-shot deal. With Stavros, his ability is always activated when he's in your leader slot or when he's got a leadership training card attached. So that means you can stop multiple attacks on your sectors. One last point of clarification with Stavros is that there's actually a number of crew members in the game that can affect other players' resources. So some might force players to share resources, or might put the value of certain sectors up or down, take resources from the player with the most resources coming in at the start of the year, or in this case, stop level 3 sectors from producing. Now, one question is, will Stavros safeguard against these types of leadership abilities? And the answer is no. He only protects the physical structures and sectors. He doesn't affect your resources. So that's just something to keep in mind.
This concludes our first episode of the Stasis Podcast. We're going to try to make this a weekly segment, so if you want to learn more about the other crew members in the game, then we encourage you to subscribe to our channel so you can get updates when future episodes go live. In case you haven't heard, Lander will be coming to Kickstarter on March 3rd, 2020. We've sent over 130 demo copies to shops and cafes around the world. So if you want to put some of the strategies we've discussed today into play, then we encourage you and your friends to go into your local venue and literally play before you pledge. See you next week.